Good evening, welcome to our live after 5 this evening. I would just like to chat to you about how we come up with a valuation for our clients for their properties. So if you're thinking of selling, it's important when you invite your agent to do a market valuation for the reason and why they came up with the price, the estimated value. So for example, when we go to a property, we obviously take a number of things into consideration. The condition of the house, the size of the house, the facilities, the size of the plot, if it's on its own site. Those would be very important considerations. And then we would do research. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Property Price Register, it is a great tool to look at. Just Google Property Price Register and put in the location of your property, and you can see what properties have been sold in your vicinity. Now, the Property Price Register is a brilliant tool. It could be better. It doesn't give a huge amount of information, but you can then search online for property that had sold previously. So for example, if it was a house in Collins Avenue and it was like 4 Bromley Drive, for example, Collins Avenue, then you could Google Property Price Register and put in Collins Avenue on the Property Price Register and see similar properties. It won't tell you how many bedrooms that the property has, but if you Google the address that you will find on the Property Price Register, you may well find an old advert for that property. And if you're thinking of selling, it's a really good idea to have a look at properties that are similar to yours that are on the market and think about, how does your house compare to those properties? I.e., you might say, well, that house is up at 280,000. I live in a housing estate, my house is the same size, it's a 3-bed semi-detached. But then you might say, well, actually my house has a brand new kitchen in it. You don't always get the full price back on the kitchen, but a buyer would probably pay more for a property that has a nicer kitchen. That is usually the case. So back to the valuation, we would usually give at least 3 comparisons, right? So we would find 3 properties that have sold in the market that are similar. Now, if it's a standalone property, it's sometimes very hard to find. You're not going to find an exact replica of your property if it's a rural property, but you might find, we would find a property that we would say is somewhat like it, particularly in the price range, and that's how we would come up with our assessment. Now, it's very important that your agent and you as the seller are comparing apples with apples. What do I mean by that? Well, I recently did an appraisal for a property out in the countryside, and the owner was expecting the property value to be similar to properties in John Garvin. Now, this property was quite rural and a lovely property, beautiful property, and in a lovely location for somebody who wants to live in a rural location with beautiful views. But we cannot compare properties in very rural locations to urban properties. Rural and urban are different. I'm not saying that rural is less expensive, but we're not comparing apples with apples. So it's good to do your own research. It's good to be looking out and see what's for sale and what is the competition like. So if you've got buyers looking, they're obviously going to be looking at other properties other than your property, and those properties are the competition if they're in a similar space and they're in a similar price bracket. And buyers, I'm afraid, don't really care how much you paid for your property. That's incidental. The price is based on market activity. It's based on what a willing buyer is willing to pay a willing seller. That's actually the definition of a valuation. Now, in the current market, the way things would be, particularly last summer, the market was really, really heated. And as agents, we give valuations, but in some cases, properties were selling 20% over the guide price. So it's basically a case of supply and demand. So we can look at market evidence, and sometimes the properties are going way above that, but we would guide them probably in line with recent sales, and really it depends on so many different factors. How your house is presented is very important, and obviously the number of interested parties is very important, because the more interested parties there are, the more likely you will achieve a higher price. Is now a good time to go to market? Yes, now is a brilliant time to go to market, because the stock levels are so low, and that means that there's very little competition on the market and the buyers have less property to choose from. So they're in a very difficult predicament. So I hope you found that interesting. Tomorrow we've got a beautiful listing coming to market in just outside Kilmeaden. Particularly excited about it. We've got some gorgeous listings coming. Beautiful apartment in Glen Cove, another one coming to the market. Lovely property on the Dunmore Road. Lots more. Watch this space and watch our social media channels, because here on Facebook, LinkedIn and Instagram, we're actually posting the properties before they go live on the portal staffed in my home. Thank you for watching. Have a lovely evening. Slán go fóill.